Hi everyone, I am honored to introduce our guest speaker for the employee engagement session at the Human Advantage Conference. Nao and Sharon, with VP Behavioral Science and Innovation at BVA People at Work Consulting and one of the BVA's group champion for employee engagement, and myself will be speaking with Caroline Webb. Caroline is an executive coach, author, and speaker known for being one of the world's leading experts in using insight from behavioral science to improve professional life. Her best-selling book, I have to say that I have loved this book. It was a really haha moment for me. In French, we say a wow moment. So her best-selling book on that topic, how to have a good day, I am maybe one of the only to have two versions of the book, a French one and the English version has been published in 17 editions, I think, and over 60 countries. She is also a senior advisor to McKinsey, where she was previously a partner. So, welcome, Caroline. A big thank you to be with us. We are very excited to have you at the Human Advantage Conference.
So let's start. Hi, Caroline. Good to see you. A lot of your work, some of it detailed in How to Have a Good Day, focuses on engagement, performance, well-being at work, and what each of us can do to improve our own work experience in terms of setting the right priorities, building relationships, maintaining resilience and joie de vivre. So I guess my first question for you today is, why is it so challenging to have a good day at work?
Well, of course, I like to lead with it is possible to have a good day at work. But yes, I mean, there are challenges. And I think you can pick out, very specific aspects of the workplace that you might be in right now. But I think the general point is just it's a very complex system. As soon as you have multiple humans interacting, each with their own desires and needs and inner thoughts, and you've got the complexity of economic and social forces acting on your workplace. You're in a very complex system, and the thing about complex systems is that nobody really controls them. You just have to look for the points of control that have disproportionate influence on the system. And I think everybody feels this at different points in their career. It might show up differently, but I was talking, my day job is in executive coaching. I was talking to a client just a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, it doesn't matter what I do, there's always something. You try to control everything else, and then something else pops up. And so we were laughing about that. And of course, we all feel a little bit like that. But behavioral science is extremely helpful in helping us understand where we do have control and where those points of disproportionate influence are in the little system that sits around us. So that's why the work that you're doing on this is so powerful and so helpful.
Thank you very much. And that's a great transition to my next question, actually, which is, can you tell us some of the key insights from behavioral science and how to apply them to have a good day, basically?
Well, of course, I've got 100 tips. I think a good filter would be, what am I working on perhaps most with my clients just right now? That's as good a way of choosing as any. I'll pick one that's very deep and one that's very practical. The one that's very deep is based on the science of selective attention, which I think probably everybody listening here will be somewhat familiar with. That's the idea that however smart we are, we have a limited amount of conscious attention. Our brain is constantly making selections about where we should be directing that conscious attention. And that there is a rule of thumb, our brains love rules of thumb, that tends to guide where we put that small stock of conscious attention. And it tends to be whatever we're already thinking about. And that might be, for example, it might be a goal that we have. So we call that inattentional blindness, where we don't see anything that's not on point for the goal that we have in front of us. And many of you will associate this with studies involving gorillas, where people fail to see a gorilla because they're not looking for it. But there are other types of what I call this sort of top of mind effect as well. I mean, sometimes we call it salience bias, where we're affected by something we just seen, and so that information looms much larger than it should when we're noticing what comes next. Our sensations in our body, when we're feeling sad, we'll tend to notice all the sorts of things that chime with sadness. And if we're feeling irritated, we'll tend to see things that, confirm we're right to be irritated. And confirmation bias is, of course, the version of this, which is the assumptions that we have will shape what we then perceive, and we'll see evidence that confirms our expectations, and we'll, somehow magically not see the rest. And this matters so much in the workplace. I think many of us know the science, but if you think about how it plays out in the workplace, it's a recipe for getting into a vicious circle or a virtuous circle. That's one of the things you can choose, and that's one of the things you can influence, because your mindset and what you take into a situation is going to so much determine what seems to happen, what you perceive. So, for example, there's a person I coach. She runs a company that's entirely virtual at this point, perhaps like some people watching this. And so she's on Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. She has one conversation which perhaps is a bit annoying or challenging. Maybe she has a difficult interaction with the board, or maybe she has a conversation with one of her team and it's a little sticky, and we all have this sort of thing. She goes straight into the next Zoom. She has this top of mind. With that annoyance or disappointment top of mind, her brain makes sure that she sees everything that confirms that she's right to feel annoyed or disappointed. What does she miss? Well, what we've discovered is, she's capable of missing good examples or successes that might be amplified as a leader. She's capable of not hearing things that people say, or missing people's facial expressions if they don't match her ingoing state of mind. And so we're working hard on saying, okay, well, let's put just a few minutes. I mean, actually, sometimes it can be just a few seconds between meetings so that she can reset her perceptual filters, because what's top of mind is going to drive what she notices next. And so she takes a moment to say, okay, what's my real aim? What attitude do I want to project? What assumptions do I carry with me? And, is there anything I need to challenge there? Maybe this person has been a jerk, but maybe this meeting is not going to be bad. Maybe this meeting is going to be good. Maybe this meeting is going to be better. And it seems so small and so trivial, but it makes such a difference to how she then experiences the next conversation. And she just sees much more of what matters. She's not filtering out the things that don't match her ingoing state of mind. It's one of the deepest, most existential interventions that I know, and I think it's probably the thing that's changed my life most. Not just professionally, but actually personally probably too. So that's selective attention. I can talk more about that, any day of the week, challenging assumptions and so forth. But the other thing that I would say is coming up a lot at the moment, actually partly jumping off that example, is the need for breaks, because I think everybody's just so exhausted at the moment that a conversation I've been trying to have with professionals for a couple of decades now is getting easier to have, which is that your brain needs a break from time to time in order to function at its best. So, our brain's conscious, deliberate system doesn't function so well after a time. It does need to be refreshed. And we know that when we get to the end of a meeting and we're a bit cranky and we're not thinking as clearly, and you just feel that people are just not as sharp as they were at the beginning. But I feel now that it's easier to have the conversations with professionals about the fact that if they get up just for 2 minutes, and that the research has shown this, that if you take a break for just 2 or 3 minutes, if you intend to come back to a problem, then your brain will continue to do encoding and consolidation in the background, which will be useful and will show you more connections when you come back to the problem at hand. And then lo and behold, you have better insight when you come back after a little break. And I think that's a lovely example of how behavioral science really helps people do what they kind of know, but actually perhaps don't do for themselves until they know that it's not an indulgence. This is actually going to not only improve their mood, but it's going to sharpen their performance and the quality of their thinking. So that's something I'm working on a lot at the moment with people, just to understand how to create blocks of time where they're offline, how to make that practical in a busy working environment, how to come off Slack from time to time. This is all sort of very real life stuff. And it's actually crucial to be able to do what I was just talking about previously on selective attention, because you need a moment to gather yourself and say, what do I want to have top of mind, knowing that that's going to shape what I notice next. I could go on. I mean, there are so many more things, right? There's so many more things, but they're the things that are, coming up a lot, this week, in this week's coaching sessions, let's say.
No, but I was thinking it's true that we all start to know the impact of just small breaks, and I think it's important also to take some time to witness how a break impacted just the meeting after, etc. To make sure that we learn from it and that we don't have to rethink taking a break every so often. I don't know if that's
so true. And I guess this gets to the point where companies and teams have a lot of power here to establish some norms around this, and say, okay, we always start a meeting with a quick round of checking in, because that will help people be fully present. I mean, okay, we might know that in principle, but there's good science behind that. Again, it's about setting your filters, your perceptual filters, to say, okay, what is it that's most important for me to notice and pay attention to now? And I do think that I'm seeing some really interesting trends and things that I've been talking about for 20 years. Now, finally, people are starting to think about how do we build in norms around, a Friday afternoon without meetings, or a norm that we never run meetings more than 45 minutes, or that we build in 5 minutes at the top of the hour before the next meeting. This stuff, is now finally happening, and I do think it's going to serve us very well in the future.
Yeah, and becoming habits, and from norms moving to habits, we see that happening. So the release of How to Have a Good Day. So it was in 2016. The COVID pandemic happened, and my next question is about what you think this big crisis has changed regarding the challenge of employee engagement specifically, and maybe what have you learned from this, and what key topics have you been addressing with respect to this pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we all feel that the workplace is changing suddenly very, very rapidly. One of the things that's just been so striking to me is how much more we're talking about burnout. My former colleagues at McKinsey have been doing some very interesting research into this. And I saw some data recently suggesting that around 25% of employees, and that's across quite a range of countries. This isn't an Anglo-Saxon phenomenon, but it's a range of countries. Around 25% of employees are reporting that they are experiencing symptoms of burnout, at least sometimes. And, obviously some are experiencing it often or all the time. That is tremendously sobering. And I think it is the accumulated effect of the uncertainty and the complexity of the last couple of years, and the worry, quite frankly, that many of us have had about our own health and our loved ones' health, and also I would say I don't think the COVID crisis caused this. I think that this is revealing a phenomenon that was there before. There was burnout in the workplace before. What I think is perhaps it's hard to say that there's a silver lining at all out of COVID, but there's a small silver lining out of COVID, which is that I think we now have more facility in talking about mental health than we did before. And I think there's more appreciation of the fact that employees are whole people with complicated lives, juggling loved ones and personal responsibilities. And I hope that doesn't go away, because I think that there has been a step change in how people are talking about the importance of these issues. And one of the I think a source of optimism is also in that same survey. 75% of chief HR officers are now seeing mental health as an active priority in their workplaces. So I think that's tremendous. And how has it affected my work? I always focused on resilience to a degree, because my work was always quite grounded and quite realistic in saying things are a little bit difficult and complicated. What can you do to have a good day within that? So that was always kind of the style of the work that I was doing. But I think it really has shifted the quality of conversations that I'm having with clients about this, because there's just much more. You don't have to take quite so long to get to the place where people are open. I was coaching a chief executive, no less, a couple of weeks ago, who admitted to me that she was feeling low. And honestly, a couple of years ago, that would have taken so long to get to. and it was so good to be able to go there, name it, work with it, work on it. So I do think that's probably the biggest shift that I've seen.
And actually, so you were talking about resilience, and I know you've led a course on how to have a good day in a certain time, and addressing this topic in the context of the pandemic still. People can access this course on your website. What are some of the key insights that you wanted to share in that series?
Well, again, there are 6 big topics that I covered. So let me think of one or two to mention. I mean, I think one thing I would say as an overarching comment is that uncertainty in itself is not bad. Uncertainty is an amplifier. It increases the intensity of the reaction that we have to both positive and negative stimuli. So, if you think about getting a surprise birthday present or a surprise present in general, that's more exciting than getting a gift that you were expecting. So uncertainty adds intensity to whatever the signal is. And so, obviously that is problematic if it's a negative signal. If things are problematic and you don't even know how bad they are, that's very, very stressful. So all the research suggests that what you want to do is bound the uncertainties. The more you can reduce the uncertainties, the less less stress it's causing your brain, the more clearly you're then able to think. Because often what happens is that, there's 10% that you don't know and there's 90% you do. And the 90% just gets washed away by the 10% that is uncertain. And so a lot of the work I do is to help people reconnect with their certainties. And so that might be things that they know. So maybe there are layoffs in prospect. Okay, that's very stressful, but they might know what the process is. They might know what the timing is for the decisions. And leaders can really help with this. This is something I work on quite a lot with my clients, is how do you give people certainty even through difficult times? So you can amplify what you know for sure, the facts that you know to be true. Once you do that, you write them down, you just notice the stress drop. You can amplify who people are, their values, their sense of continuity and what's important to them. So that can be very powerful. And then it can also be very powerful to pause and think about, well, what is there that you can choose here? Because you can choose your attitude, you can choose perhaps some rituals, and all of this stuff might sound quite small, but once you add it up and you get people to focus on what I know, what I am, what I choose, this allows you, right, it gives you back enough clarity to be able to tackle the uncertainty rather than have it sort of whirling around. So that's the sort of thing that I work on a lot. And I have to say, going back to your questions earlier on about what am I working on in the tail end, hopefully, of COVID, that is obviously working on uncertainty, both helping leaders guide others through and then helping, larger groups of people manage their mental state through it. Yeah, I think that's going to be with us for a long time. That's an important topic.
First, thank you very, very much for these insights. And his last question before starting the roundtable is, what advice would you give chief people officers who want to start using behavioral science in their work?
I think it's a very good question. I mean, there's going to be so much stimulation, so much interesting stuff coming out of watching all of these sessions and being part of all of these sessions that you're organizing. But actually, I would say most chief people officers that I know, and I know a few, are doing fascinating work, really interesting work in employee engagement, really creative work in thinking about how to help people find meaning and purpose in the workplace and so forth. So it's not, I think, for me to say that they should be doing anything new. I think chief people officers might consider the possibility of using behavioral science to engage their colleagues on the things that they already know to be good interventions. Because my experience is that chief people officers, chief HR officers, often a big part of the work is actually getting their colleagues on board with the ideas and getting the top team to stand behind it and to role model all of this. So the more that you can use behavioral science, this was always my experience, the more you can use behavioral science, you can explain the science underpinning, say, a new coaching approach or a new feedback approach or the importance of taking breaks, the more likely you are to get quite analytical types to engage and be willing to try a new behavior and to model a new behavior to the organization. So that was such a big part of my practice when I was working at McKinsey. And I think it really can help so much in helping the skeptics understand the reason for behavioral change. Yeah, so look at what you're already doing and excavate the academic backing for it, and then go forth with that.
Transmit it and use it as a good
scaffold. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you again very much for taking the time to share all these insights with us today. It was, as you know, a pleasure to
we could have talked for hours more, I know, but it's wonderful to connect, and it's useful for people who are listening.
Thank you.